It's our pleasure and privilege, and really very much our privilege, on behalf of our EMCC Global colleagues, EMCC Council, Global Executive Board, affiliated countries and regions, EMCC Global Ambassadors and champions worldwide, friends and partnership organisations, to convey a very warm welcome to this, our 5th annual EMCC Global Provider Summit, GPS 2022, the dialogue shaping our future. My name's Denise Whitworth. I'm a member of the EMCC Global Executive Board, Global Director, and EMCC Global Vice President Accreditation. I'm also joined by Riza, Dr. Riza Kadlar, our EMCC Global President. The GPS, I think as many of you will realise, has a very special place in our hearts and in our minds since we first launched this prestigious event and concept 5 years ago in 2018. The GPS and GPS Dialogue series would not exist without the amazing generosity and ongoing support from our EMCC Global Accredited Individuals, organisations and providers of education and training worldwide. For the past 5 years, all our partners have contributed to our journey to where we are today. And indeed, our ongoing key purpose and focus is to co-create the future for our professional practice, leadership, mentoring, coaching, team coaching, program management, and supervision. I'd like to express, and together on behalf of all my colleagues, a very, very special heartfelt thank you in advance to all our GPS 2022 hosts and truly fantastic participants across the globe, taking part in our session dialogues, especially this week, including our EMC Council, EMCC Global Executive Board colleagues, affiliated country and regional boards and members, all our wonderful volunteers and magnificent teams, supporting teams worldwide. The time zones, of course, are completely round the clock following the sun. So people will be logging in and participating at different times during people's awake time. So we will get people joining and popping in and out of sessions. But the dialogue we anticipate is really going to be, if our past experience is anything to go by, going to be very rich and very valuable to inform our next steps in terms of co-creating our future. The key themes from our previous summits and dialogue sessions to continue to contribute to our EMCC Global strategy for 2022 to 2024. So our roundtable co-created dialogues across all our EMCC Global countries worldwide are really going to continue to provide us with that inspirational platform for co-created and shared learning. So our aim is totally to immerse in new thinking, gain new insights, make new connections, and feel energized for the rest of 2022 and far beyond. So Riza, what's in store? Over the 4 days, we have panels, case studies, innovation hubs, accelerator hubs, amazing lead up now to our first leadership panel. So over to you, Riza, for some of your initial reflections on what's in store.
First of all, I don't know, may I say good morning, good afternoon? I don't know, wherever you are, I see on the chat. Pretty much European though, but I know we have guests or attendees from US and Asia Pacific. So wow. It was my very first year when we came up with some new events, ideas. And one of them is GPS. And I'm so grateful to Denise to make it happen. This is for the 5th time now. So amazing, because in the co-creation of our profession, in the co-creation of our future, I believe one of the most important stakeholders are you. when I say you are the ones who are training the future mentors and coaches. You are the ones having the professional designations. So you are, in a way, putting in place the reality. And together with our coachees, with our mentees, with our clients, we create an ecosystem where I believe all we claim, because our purpose is to promote, to create, but also to promote and to set the best expectation of mentoring, coaching, and supervision globally. And this is a tribute to thank you for your trust and ongoing work. But at the same time, to make this a kind of ongoing practice for us, to having this dialogue with all of you, to learn from each other, so that your input will be in a way to shape the future the way EMCC is. We are in a way a platform, okay? So we know nothing better than you or whatever. So I'm also a provider. I'm also living daily with my clients, with my coaches, with my mentees, with my students. And at the end of the day, I see EMCC as a platform where I can bring my expertise, my knowledge, my experience, so that it can be blended to co-create the future. In EMCC, numbers grew. Amazing, isn't it? It's my 5th year on the executive board with my current capacity as the president of the GEB and the organization in a way. And from, I don't know, just low figures of professional designations, now we are about, what, 12, 13,000? Members from 4,000 to 14,000. We didn't even have a kind of LinkedIn page. Now we have about 20 odd whatever thousand people following. So kind of we're creating an ecosystem where our dialogue means something. Means something not for just coaches, but for the humanity at large, I would say. For example, we do some work with European Commission. And one of the biggest problems in Europe, they say, is the labor force rigidity. So we're going to cover some of these parts in the panel to come in a few minutes, but let me just share this. Coaching has already achieved this. In coaching globally, we can easily create this, we have these micro-credentialing algorithms, methodologies, where anywhere in the world, people can have a second, third, fourth career in coaching. That doesn't exist in any most other professions. So for European Commission, it's really kind of great discovery how we do it. And for us, it's a great gift and opportunity to be in dialogue with other professional bodies in order to let them know how we did it. So this kind of examples, we do work on various fronts. We're going to talk about it, technology. We're going to maybe touch upon this in inclusion. We are co-creating the new standards on team coaching, we already done on the supervision. So the whole kind of marketplace and the big question about how we can contribute to the leadership, more than leadership, human capital development in the world, that keeps us busy in EMCC. So I talk too much, sorry. But at the end of the day, I'm so excited, so happy to have you all here and your contribution through this dialogue series, through direct reach to all of us, anyone of the executive board, anyone in the council, really will make a difference so that we'll learn from each other and we'll all put our energy in the same basket in order to achieve maybe more aligned goals in order to create a better future for humanity. And even maybe before the future, I should talk about today with all the challenges we face today. I think that will be a good kind of bridge, isn't it, Denise, to invite our panelists for the first session.
It is absolutely, Reza, yes.
So we declare it open, so officially.
We do, absolutely. So exciting, and good luck and enjoy the sessions that you are able to attend. Thank you. And yes, over to our first amazing panel. I'm ready for your introductions, Reza, to your fantastic panel today.
Thank you, Denise. So actually, when the pandemic kicked in, we were kind of so happy to be on the same screen, isn't it? I see Liz here. We had this series about every Friday to come together globally. And now we're all tired with Zoom all over the place. But I see all of you here. with so much energy and enthusiasm. And I'm so glad and happy to have the panelists here. I see Rachel, Kendall. So I have this crowded screen. I like to see everyone. So that's why, I need to kind of search for you in a way. All right. So we are living in an era, and the topic says seismic shifts in the leadership. I don't know what it means. We're gonna all discover all together. In the first round, I will kindly invite our panelists to have a very quick introduction. So at least everybody hear your voice a little bit, put the name on the face, and to get to know a little bit about your background, even though I will invite everyone to check the LinkedIn page, of course. But the way you want to introduce yourself, very quickly, who are you, where are you, what keeps you busy, any position that you enjoy and institution you represent here today. Over to you. So who's willing to start?
Hi, everybody. It is a privilege to be here. And yeah, to be in this profession. My background, so I run a company called Untapped AI, and we are a coaching company, and we've developed something called network coaching. We're really passionate about systemic change, so culture change, using coaching. My background is I'm a psychologist. I used to work, I'm based in London in the UK, but we're an Irish company. I'm part Irish, part Indian. And we, what was I going to tell you? Oh, I've got 5 children. So yes, and my background was working for the NHS. I started as a clinical psychologist, moved to business psychology and occupational psychology. Yeah, and we're really passionate about using coaching, using technology to look at data to change the system. And there's lots of systems to be changed. So very happy to be here.
Excellent. Thank you, Kendall. May I cherry pick the next name? Sheldon?
Hi, thanks, Reza. Hi, my name is Sheldon Daniel. As the accent might tell you, I'm from somewhere in the Caribbean, specifically Trinidad and Tobago, but today I'm sitting in Warsaw. My background is, Warsaw. My background is in the energy, particularly the upstream oil and gas companies. That's where I cut my teeth. My last role about 10 years ago was Director Corporate Responsibility of BP at BP headquarters in London. Since then, I've been doing consulting work around what a catchphrase I call helping solve thorny issues in leadership and communication. My sort of subject area is communication, but leadership, increasingly leadership and communication has become quite synonymous. And that is also the focus of my coaching. As a Black man coaching in this area, I also find myself increasingly having conversations about diversity and inclusion, sometimes not necessarily by choice, but because of the fact that one challenge the coaching profession is to become much more diverse and inclusive. So that's me.
Perfect. Thank you, Sheldon. Lots of questions coming to my mind, but anyway, we'll see. Rachel.
Morning. Thanks very much, Reza, and lovely to hear from you all. So I'm up in the northeast at the moment, visiting my family in Newcastle, although I live in London, so I'm a bit of an exiled Geordie for the Brits who'll know what I mean by that. I'm president of EMCC UK. Amazingly, I've done 18 months in that role already, which has gone so quickly. And those again in the UK will know there's been lots of new roles appearing on the board. We've been doing a bit of a restructure. I also run my own small business, and I specialize in team coaching. And I tend to work quite a lot in the tech sector. So I tend to work with what I would call subject matter experts, so scientists, technologists, engineers, that sort of thing, and a little bit of work in the academic world as well. I often find myself as the only woman in the room, or perhaps with one other woman who's usually the HR person. So some of that will ring true to you. And last night I just sent off my final draft of a chapter on team coaching, which hopefully will be in a book published next year. That was quite scary. It's the first time I've done that. So that was a very deep learning experience. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you all today.
Perfect. And Sam.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Sam Isaacson. It's great to be with you today. So thank you so much for inviting me. I am Global Director of Consulting for Coach Hub, which is one of the biggest providers of coaching through a technology platform in the world. My background is in technology risk consulting. So my full-time job was working out what could go wrong with technology and coming up with solutions of how to prevent that or reduce the risk of it. And so matching together that background with my passion for coaching, I've ended up focusing on the world of coaching technology. So I've written a couple of books on that. And I've also ended up focusing on coaching within organizations. And so a couple of years ago, I chaired the Trailblazer group in England, which developed the coaching professional apprenticeship, which has got EMCC's blessing. They're part of that group, and that's it's great. And I believe that it's the biggest coach development program in England at the moment. And so it's really exciting to be part of that. And kind of connected to that, I've contributed to the new Sage Handbook of Coaching with a chapter on organizational coaching. So I'm really excited to be part of this dialogue today and part of the next week. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And I just realized, not everybody should know about anything about myself. So let me also kind of put it into context. I'm originally from Turkey. And I live in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. I'm connected now today from home, which is a rare thing because I do travel quite a bit. I do some investments in technology companies, startups. Okay, I should confess, I'm a banker, okay, originally. Nobody's perfect. So I've been around for 30 years in the banking industry, but lately I'm independent. So on one side, on financial advisory, on the other side, I'm a full-time coach, mentor, and also run my own online coaching and training school. But most of my time is dedicated to EMCC lately, so I tend to neglect them all. And I'm married with a daughter. She's studying food technology in a university in the Netherlands. So kind of, trying to see what's going on in the world, especially in the corporate life. And because I'm asked to deliver some keynote speeches at some events, and I need to reinvent myself all the time. And I learn a lot from such dialogue series and conversations with our colleagues. So let's start because the topic says there are some seismic shifts. So let's go from the other way around. I will start with Sam. Tell me, Sam, what are the main changes you see in the world that affects leadership today?
Yeah, I think there are lots of challenges, and I think we're all experiencing those in different ways, but I'll speak to what I know about, and so I'll think about how technology is changing. There are a couple of particular technologies that are emerging at the moment that are causing a level of disruption. Probably the most basic of those that we're seeing in every kind of realm of our lives is artificial intelligence. That we're seeing it with the way that our social media feeds are curated for us. We're seeing it in the way that our retail is suggesting products for us, and we're seeing it starting to creep into the world of coaching. And that's just one example across the whole world of business. People's jobs are being disrupted in the way that organizations run are changing and are having to change as a result of artificial intelligence. The second of those, it would be thinking about the metaverse. And we've just seen recently, Meta coming up with a whole bunch of changes. One thing that they are not changing is their commitment to investing into the metaverse. And that's something Mark Zuckerberg has been absolutely strong on. Apple are releasing a headset this coming year, and then they'll be coming up with something in 2024 that I believe is going to completely change the way that we run things like this, remote communications that will be happening through augmented reality and virtual reality. And that's something that's going to change the way that organizations operate, that people communicate, and particularly the way that coaching's delivered. And so I think as coaches, we should be right on the front foot of knowing kind of what's happening so that we're able to engage properly when that shift happens. And the third of these that I would throw in there as well is the whole world of Web 3.0, which effectively comes out of blockchain technology. And we're starting just to see the first indicators of that At the moment, Starbucks have recently released a rewards scheme that has got all kinds of bells and whistles, and it's all coming out of the decentralized nature of the way that technology works, which is very different from anything that we're using at the moment. That's something that isn't going to be starting disrupting things for the next 12 months or so, I think, but it's starting to creep in. And so I think it's just good to keep an eye on what's going on there, and it's what leaders are thinking about in terms of the way they're structuring their businesses and their strategies.
So what I hear is technology, and you highlighted created content, metaverse, Web3, like the blockchain. And, you know, I don't know how many of you were in our conference in Amsterdam a few years ago, and we had a keynote speaker. I forget his name, I remember in a way, from Switzerland, a great gentleman. And he showed us a kind of graph. I remember he was mentioning all this LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, whatever you name it, that dominates, or like B&B or whatever, so all those, you know, the booking.com, whatever. And he was telling that, you know, they were all kind of created just before the financial crisis, 2008, 9, 10, whatever. But then as we were very busy with the financial crisis, they were kind of subdued, and 5-10 years later, they emerge as the dominant force of our daily life. So what I hear from Sam, we are busy with, I don't know, war, energy, but we're going to hear some other things. But Sam kind of tells me that 12 months or 12 years, I don't know, but those technologies will definitely emerge. So we can't really, you know, close our eyes on those technologies. Okay, technology is number one. Thanks, Sam. So then Rachel.
Thanks, Riza. I guess I'm going to take the opposite end of the kind of view, the lens from Sam. So I'm going to look at the kind of the human and the interaction side of things. And one of the things that I'm really noticing that organizations and particularly leadership teams are struggling with is engagement. And I think, you know, how we create and build and develop that social capital and those human ties with colleagues in a virtual world is continuing to be a real challenge. You know, the whole debate around how many hours we spend in the office together, how we connect, how we get to know each other, how we build that social capital, especially when you're newly entering into an organization. So I think I'm hearing a lot about that. I attended a conference virtually in New York by an organization called Charter, and some of the leading experts in the field were sort of saying, look, we just don't know. So I think we're in that really, really interesting transitional space between pre-pandemic and what's going to happen next. And I think one of the big challenges we have is that research is lagging behind. So because the changes haven't happened yet, it's really hard to research them. So there's research coming out, but it's kind of lagging behind practice. And then I think, you know, the further implication of that is literally the sort of how organizations are structured, because we're structured in a way typically that fits the old model of working. And we haven't really, we've made adaptations, but we haven't really found kind of the new way yet. And so I think that kind of, we're in that liminal space, which is what we work with as coaches all the time, but we're in that as organizations, as societies. And then, you know, as Sam said, we've got this whole technology piece underlying that. So we're really going through absolutely massive change. And I think, you know, we have to work with it and sit with it. And it's a real, I'd love to hear what other people think.
Excellent. I hear the human element, the engagement, social capital, how to get engaged in this virtual world. And what I like, you know, most of the experts, they say they don't know, which means they're in a kind of, you know, being kind of comfortable, uncomfortable in the unknowing. And the structures, we live with the past structures, are they fit for today's and the futures? And unfortunately, research, you know, is lagging behind. So thank you, Rachel. So Sam, I'm sorry, Sheldon.
Thanks. Actually, I will start with trying to link both what Sam said with what Rachel said, because in a sense, what's going to happen is as technology becomes more pervasive or pervasive as well as different, you're going to have increasingly leaders having to look for the things that are uniquely human that can be added only by a human, such as creativity, critical thinking, interpersonal communication, and those aspects that Rachel talked about, which is caring and compassion. So one thing of the leader of the future will have to be looking for is, increasingly what are those paradoxically most human aspects of work that they have to lead on while being technology leaders, as Sam was saying. So there's that complexity of more human and more tech savvy that's going to face the new leader. So I completely want to then also add that what Rachel said about this more sort of human-centric leadership model that sort of emerged during the pandemic, where leaders were now becoming, empathy in chief, the sort of key communicator, being much more present and visible. It started asking them to demonstrate social skills that previously may have been, they could have hidden if they weren't quite good at it. But now, certainly the expectation is that you're front and center of the leadership of your organization, and not only talking about strategy, but talking about things like vision, purpose, and as Rachel said, engagement along those. It's really beginning to pull on very different skills that, let's face it, traditional MBA type programs don't actually equip many leaders for. So I think that's another thing. And the third thing I would like to add is that what the pandemic seemed to have done is sort of highlight or solidify in everybody's mind that the health of business is so crucially dependent on the health of people. It sort of solidified that business and society need to live and work in harmony with each other. The upshot is that many of you all would have heard about environmental, social, and governance issues. Those issues are going to become more and more prevalent as businesses are held to account now for what are you doing to make sure that as we speak, COP in Egypt just demonstrated that businesses are being held now to be responsible for their impact on society more and more. And I think the pandemic accelerated that, and leaders of corporates will have to now begin to ask themselves, how do I do business responsibly? What does that mean? And how do I engage in these increasingly difficult conversations and stakeholders about questions for which business tend to have always given the answer, well, we make money, that's what we do. I think that answer is not going to be enough in the future, and that will be a significant challenge for leaders.
Wow, so many things, so great insight. So I hear ESG, COP27, and the companies are responsible. I hear the keyword that I really like, harmony. The keyword health of people determines the health of the business. The purpose, how we can rethink about the MBA programs, the social skills, how more human-centric, and it's tech-savvy, human-centric models, and you mentioned the creativity, critical thinking, interpersonal skills, and compassion for leaders. Wow, who want to be a leader in today's world? I don't know, so challenging. So we're going to come back to how coaching could help, but before we do, Kendall.
Thank you, Rita, and really interesting, perspectives there. So I suppose looking at the seismic shifts in the environment, what that for us on our platform, the biggest thing is the resilience of the leaders to cope. And I suppose what's really key is that it's more than resilience. And a word we use, which I think was a term from 2012, but it just seems more relevant than ever now, is anti-fragility. And it's for all of us, but leaders more than ever, and us working and coaching leaders, is this concept that being resilient when the wind comes and just bending back is not enough, because it just never keeps, it's always coming. There's the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And so this kind of anti-fragile, which takes resilience to one step further, is actually becoming tougher and more resilient as a result of the economic climate, as a result of all the leaders that are cost cutting right now, laying people off. So yeah, I think thriving, I know it's sometimes a corny word, but through the change and having a mindset instead of thinking, oh, it's another thing and it's another thing and another thing. Actually, and I have to do it to myself in my own business, but this kind of anti-fragility mindset to cope and see it differently is just fundamental. Another thing that is fundamental right now is embracing Gen Z. And having 5 children of my own and knowing how I brought them up, for all of the parents out there that have brought up Gen Z, we have created Gen Z and now they're in the workforce and embrace. So 30% of the workforce by 2025 will be Gen Z. That's only 3 years. And what that requires for our leaders is the emotional intelligence and all the things that Sheldon was just talking about, is to embrace the way they see the world. And that is a real challenge, but it's one that we all have to embrace. So yes, that is a key thing. I think you've talked about hybrid working and how fundamental that is and what that, and I suppose the word I would use is nuance, that when everybody's in different places all over, the nuance of a leader to tap into each and every individual is just critical. And it requires, as Sheldon was saying, absolutely, you know, and we're all in this profession and it's tough enough, let alone people, as you were saying, Rachel, with much more scientific backgrounds, or so that IQ moving to EQ, just critical. And I suppose the thing that just with all the elections in the world is just the world becoming so polarized, and leaders navigating and tackling polarization in their own teams, in their own people, in their own companies, across cultures. And I think somebody said, I think it was Sheldon, but the ability to have difficult conversations, and our job as coaches to enable that. It's really tough. And that skill of conflict and difficult conversations when you've got so many polarized views across every country, absolutely key. So yes, we have a lot of work to do. Yeah.
Wow. I'm so glad. I hear, yeah, the challenge is how do I feel included, isn't it? So it's becoming more and more difficult. We talk about inclusion here, but the real world talk about maybe more, not real world, but the other part of the world talk about polarized systems, and some people do navigate a lot. Hybrid working environment, the emotional intelligence, embracing Gen Z. And you know, I have a claim. There's another Gen Z inside of me.
Yes, we weren't allowed to be Gen Z, were we? We weren't allowed.
Most of the time when I'm upset, I realize my own Gen Z is upset. So anyway, yeah, you're right. The thriving through change and resilience, entrepreneurship, and what I really hear, the wind never stops.
Never.
Wow. So what? So then the question is, how do you see mentoring, coaching, and supervision? All we stand for here, our profession, our practice, how relevant we are, and what can we, or our work, basically, can offer. So let's mix them up, the order now. So shall we start with Sheldon? Would that be okay? And Sheldon, before you start, I thank you for a reminder. You know, my questions are limited. So this is a conversation. So
Right.
after that round, I will invite all panelists to ask questions to each other. And then all participants also to, in the chat, or just opening your mic, to also join the conversation. Because the idea is this is a dialogue, okay? We are all here to learn from each other. But first, before we do that, I'd like to hear your view, how coaching, mentoring, supervision could be relevant, is relevant, and what can we offer in this kind of challenging environments to leaders. Sheldon.
Well, I think we've all in our contribution sort of touched a bit of what coaching and mentoring and supervision can do. What I think specifically is that as as we provide our services, we actually have to be sort of mindful of all of these emerging themes, trends, because that's what will come into our conversation. You know, Kendall's point about difficult conversations. How many of us here have had that as the subject of a coaching conversation? Because it is becoming increasingly difficult for employees, for those who work for companies, for leaders to sort of connect with their work, to connect their work with their life outside, which is why we hear this conversation about the great resignation and quiet quitting. People's relationship to their work has sort of been shifted tremendously due to the pandemic, and people thinking, well, what am I here, and what is worth me spending my time on? So I think, firstly, we have to make sure that we are steeped in the knowledge of all of these issues. There are also very specific conversations that some of us, or many of us, have to prepare ourselves for. And I will give an example from my coaching. I was stopped about 2 months ago in one of my coaching sessions, and I was asked, can I ask what it is like to be a Black person? This was in the coaching. I had to make an instantaneous decision at that point. What do I do? And I asked, well, why do you want to know that? And the person, they were managing 3 Black associates, and they were struggling as to how to have a conversation with them that involved race that was appropriate. Now, for us as coaches, regardless of whether we are Black, brown, white, wherever we come from, those are conversations we need to be prepared for, to have and to be able to help people navigate that space. So a second thing that we can do is to sort of make sure that we are aware of how to handle some of these and by the way, race, I think, is probably one of the simpler ones to address. There are some more thorny ones that to prepare yourself for would be, it will take quite a lot of time, but they will come, because that generation that Kendall was pointing out, they will come with those issues. So actually being ready to have a view and have a way of coaching, mentoring, and supervising around some of those very thorny issues will be critical for us. So firstly, being, in a sense, constantly aware of all of these issues. And then secondly, preparing through networks or rehearsing with each other on some of those more critical issues, I think would be important for us as coaches, and as coaches as agencies supplying coaching services.
Sheldon, this is, an eye-opening. This week, we had a council meeting. This is the highest level of governance in EMCC. And the topic was the climate challenge. So we have a work group, Center for Excellence, working on this, and we had done a survey, and there are the results. But at the end of the day, a part of our community says having a view on any issue is conflicting with coaching principles. Coaching should be non-directive, non-judgmental, isn't it? But having a view, you may end up. But on the other hand, we don't live in an isolated world. So we are all related, interdependent with our coaches, their systems, and the whole systems in the world. More than having a view, I think we should really have a way to reflect on those issues. And more we reflect, you're right, maybe we can get prepared how to make it for the benefit of the coachee in our conversations. And I like your expression, thorny issues. I will use this expression, thorny issues. Wow. All right. Thank you very much. So if I go back to Kendall to make it like change the order, what would you say? How coaching and mentoring and supervision are related to?
I'm going to stick with the thorny. I think that's exactly the word to flow through. I suppose what I was thinking about when Sheldon was talking was just how we have to work on ourselves. And I think that's kind of the theme that's coming through here. So and many difficult conversations. So having a coaching company, which is what I've got, and how do I enable myself and my team to work through difficult conversations within, whether they be about race, whether they be about politics, whether they be about gender. And actually, the work that we have to do on ourselves just is fundamental to be able to be in any position to help other people. So yeah, we get it wrong many times in our own company, but in Untapped AI, but that difficult conversations in particular, we are continually using the principle of conflict and honesty and bringing things up and not having to all agree. So supervision in particular. So we're doing that without each other and getting it wrong and making mistakes, I suppose, seems to be the most fundamental part of that, to be able to make mistakes, because you can't move forward unless you're making mistakes and knowing what the mistakes were and are. And then that, for me, has to then translate to supervision of our work, so that that discussion is going on, and knowing you can bring the work and have a space, fundamental space. Supervision is fundamental to us, to be able to discuss and debate your caseload. So I just think that that was crucial. The other thing, I suppose, if we're just keeping with the theme of looking at ourselves, is how do we thrive in this environment? We're taking on a lot by working with other people and being in a very difficult economic climate. But how do we look at our own anti-fragility? And that I have to work on personally all the time. And also think about my people, because if they're in a position to help others, again, we've got to look at ourselves. So, and even EQ that we were talking about earlier, because with Gen Z, because with hybrid working, that seems such a fundamental skill. And how do I and my own team enable us to get better at that? Because it's a continual journey to improve how you relate to others. And I never feel that I'm going to get there, but I've got to keep working on it. As with the leaders that we work with, to continue think it's not something you're going to just learn about and put down. It's a journey, just like being a parent, let's say. And it's ongoing, and all I can do is focus on getting better. So I suppose my summary is, yes, working on ourselves by default will help the working with our coaches and therefore with our users.
You know, thank you, Kendall. That really opens the perspective for me, because when the coach is a name, even can be debated, isn't it? Like, no, it means different things to different people, whatever. But what's really at core is reflective practice. So we are in reflective practice, and what you say is supervision, for example, is a domain, is a place for reflective practice. And as we also work with leaders, we are also the leaders of our own organizations. So yeah, and all the challenges are also applicable for us, how to thrive in this difficult environment as coaches and business owners. Yeah, and ongoing progress, ongoing reflection. Thank you. So, Rachel?
Thanks, Riza. I mean, I think a lot's already been said. So for me, I struggle with differentiating ourselves from our clients, because we are all business people. We do run companies. We are leaders. We are representatives. We're part of society. We're not a separate entity. And I really struggle with the belief that we can ever be purely neutral. We're not. We all have backgrounds. We all have beliefs. We all have views on the world. And I think it's really naive to think that we can walk into a room and leave that behind. And I also think that, we have to role model. If we're sort of saying to our clients, you need to use coaching skills, you need to be aware, you need to have this sort of systemic perspective of the world, we have to demonstrate that we have that awareness ourselves, and and that point of view. And I think as a professional body, as you know, I lead the UK, I sit with this every single day. Am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right decisions? You know, have we got the right people around the table? Where are we taking this organisation? Are we representative of our membership? Who are our members? Why aren't people members? Why aren't people volunteering for things? And I just think we have to just question ourselves all the time about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I think to your point at the kickoff of the whole event, Riza, you know, look how many thousands of people are involved in our ecosystem. Look at the change that we could make. So I think, you know, seeing ourselves as part of the solution, and also seeing ourselves as part of the problem, is the challenge that we have. So if we take a step back and look at it from that perspective.
So in a way, we don't have to be purely neutral. Maybe it's not even possible, but we have to make use of our own coaching skills and coaching identity to benefit from. And not in the only for the benefit of the coaches, but also us, a part of the system. And I will kind of connect back to Kendall's point about supervision, which is a great place to maybe to put that into practice. And Sam.
Yes. Oh dear, I'm not able to deal with technology. That's something to deal with, isn't it, as coaches? I think that what coaches, mentors, and supervisors are able to contribute is what we've always been able to contribute, which is providing that safe space for a leader to be able to explore issues and have them challenged and be able to challenge them themselves. And so I think that this idea that we need to go into a coaching session, and if somebody's coming up with a solution that we don't agree with, even if it's something that we've absolutely wholeheartedly, you know, believe with, this is an ethical foundation, the value we can add there is being the non-directive, non-judgmental mirror for them to be able to critically analyze that themselves. Because I think that people are getting that sort of challenge around climate change and systemic injustice and all of this. They're already getting that from every other angle. They know it's there, but they haven't got a safe space that coaching, you know, really can uniquely offer. And so I think about the change that we're going through as a world at the moment, and there's so much of it, and it is never stopping. You know, that idea of the wind just never stopping. There's no ability to bounce back. It's very powerful. And I think if there's anybody who's able to deal with that ambiguity and deal with the unknown of the future, it should be coaches. And yet, coaches are some of those that tend to like things the way that we've always done them. So I look at most ways that coaches and coachees engage in an engagement, and I think what's different between the way we do it now in 2022 and the way that I had my first coaching session in like 1998. What's the difference? Do it on Zoom now. Is there any other difference? Well, not really. I think there's something about us as coaches where we should be a little bit more aware, so that when there's a disruption that's happening, as we saw in 2020, that our instinct is not to panic and think, you know, the world's ending. We should be on the front foot with all of it and be a lot more comfortable with that, so that when the leaders are coming to us to be able to reflect on that, that of all of the places that they can go to with their issues, our place is the safe one, where they feel like, oh, I'm able to deal with this here. I'm thinking about, this is not real, but there is somebody real out there. If you're a CFO of a palm oil company and you're having to wrestle with, do I invest in more logging? As a coach, I mean, I know what my opinion is on that, but then they will already have thought this through and be thinking, well, if I say no to this, I'm going to lose my job. Somebody else is going to come in and do it anyway. If I don't invest in this, we're going to lose our profits. People are going to lose their jobs. That's partly my responsibility. I'm trying to weigh all of this stuff up. I need to go into a coaching session and know that's the place where I'm able to properly grapple with this and come up with a solution that I'm fully aligned with. And that's the gift that we can bring to leaders at these times. And it's not going to go away. You know, the issue that we're experiencing today, in a year's time, it will be a different one, but it's going to be equally as challenging or more so. So I completely agree with what Kendall's saying. You know, we need to be doing that self-work so that when we come on conferences like this, that we don't just tick a box and think, oh, great, ticked off my CPD for the year, but we're coming to the end of each session and feeling like, how am I going to change as a result of this time that we've got together? So that's why, I mean, I love the value that I personally get from stuff like this. And yeah, can't wait to see what comes up in the conversation next.
Yeah, ambiguity has always been around, and more ambiguity, maybe it's kind of more role for coaches because we are supposed to feel more comfortable with the unknown. In principle, yes, but you also mentioned the keyword value. Even though you didn't mention ethics, it really kind of connects with the ethical framework of coaching, of every coach, and the debate and the case. And, you know, it's not that easy. There's no kind of compass that shows what's right and wrong. And everyone has their own kind of compass and need a place to reflect. So one of our role at the EMCC, together with 10 other co-signatories, for example, we have decided to do more work on the ethical dilemmas in coaching next year. And maybe, you know, everything you mentioned will be also kind of, you know, an input. So thank you. I think we kind of have shared our opinion about where the world is heading or the challenges of today. And our coaches, our mentees, and our participants, our students, and, you know, whatever the position we have, somehow our work has big relevance. But before I ask any other question, I will just take a question from the chat. And the question was about hope. I need to find the question. You will all be able to read it, I think. Yeah. The perspective about current generalized global pessimism. So the question says, it's Mauricio, yeah. And he mentions the global pessimism, if you agree or not. And if you do, what is the role of the hope in coaching? So what would you say, the panel?
I'm happy to start.
Please.
It's a great question. Global pessimism. I think it's hard not to, is it that you need 5 positive thoughts for every 1 negative? So we have to try really hard to stop the pessimism pulling us under. So I suppose the biggest thing that I would say is accountability. What we do in coaching, mentoring, counseling, therapy is give somebody the accountability to think through what their own hope is. So I think we have a huge role in that because it's about what can you do. And I think that's the one of the most powerful things we do is give somebody their own accountability. The other hope, I just want to link to Sam really, is technology. I think the technology and the shift in technology of how we can use it in coaching to accessibility and democratization, to get to people that would never get this sort of support and help, and also to speed up the process of learning about yourself. Because the more AI, we use AI, and what Sam was talking about, the metaverse and augmented reality, is we all know how hard it is and what a continual journey it is to learn about ourselves, and technology can really help speed that up. So I think there's a great place for us, whether it's embracing the technology and helping our work to speed up the process of self-awareness. But I also think the work we do by default gives people accountability, which gives hope, because if you are in control of what you do and you can do positive things, that makes a massive difference.
Being from the role of a victim to the role of being in charge, whatever you can be in charge. Yeah, thank you, Kent. Anything else?
Well, I was just going to essentially echo what Kendall said, because if in a coaching session someone came to you and said they were pessimistic, I think what you would do is sort of explore the areas where you had some control and explore those to which you were sort of a victim, almost sort of, you know, you had very little ability to influence. And in that sense, I think people may, given all the plethora of bad news, people might not realize just how much agency they may have in some small areas, and therefore letting them kind of dwell on that, and hopefully that brings a sense of optimism that there are things in the future that will allow it to look better or be better.
concept of agency. Yeah, thank you, Sheldon. Yeah.
Could I just add on to that, that I think there is always hope. Doesn't matter how bad anything looks, like there's always hope. And as coaches, you know, we're able to bring a space where people can just take a step back and discover that for themselves. And I think that's powerful. But we all know, I mean, most people know in the world, if you were to ask them, they would be able to tell you this. News outlets have a tendency to report bad news more than good news, and social media makes us unhappy. And we live in a world where we check social media multiple times a day, and we have news channels reporting news 24 hours a day. You know, there is no need. There's sometimes, I mean, I live in the UK. You'll all know we lost our Queen, and for 10 days, there was no news. We just didn't have any. It was all about the Queen. That was it. And it just turned out, oh, actually, if the newspapers choose not to talk about something, well, it might as well not be happening. But what our coachees are experiencing is every single day, multiple times a day, they're reminded of the cost of living crisis, which only exists because the media tells us that that's what it's called. You know, if they didn't tell us that, we wouldn't call it that. We would be talking about something else. You know, we know about all of the, you know, the horrific work that is happening across the world in different places, in business and in politics. We know about how everything's polarized because we're told all the time. Actually, you know, the sense of hope that we have can come from the way that we go around our days, and we can bring that to our coachees by helping to increase their self-awareness of it. So if somebody comes and they're talking about how pessimistic they are because every day they're reminded half a dozen times about how the cost of living crisis is affecting people, well, maybe they could discover that simply by reading the news less, they're going to feel that sense less, or that they can do exactly that, take some agency and make a difference. You know, the people that we're coaching often have got a level of influence to be able to impact things. And by taking responsibility and putting it into place, then yeah, we can do something.
Yeah, having the choice and accountability where to focus our attention. Yeah.
So I think, I mean, I fundamentally believe in the human spirit, and I struggle with this view that people are pessimistic. I think the press and the media are pessimistic, but when I meet people, individuals and teams, that's not my impression. I mean, and I worked with Macmillan Cancer Support. I worked with people who were dying of cancer, and they still had hope. They still had things they wanted to do. They still had an indomitable human spirit. So I think that's present in all of us. I think it's finding the outlet for that and giving people something, you know, to look forward to. But I also think on the reverse of that, I think there's something about being realistic as well. And I think, you know, we don't help things as a profession if we pretend all the time that everything's great and fine when it isn't. So I think there's an also acceptance that sometimes things aren't great, but it's how we move on from that rather than taking a negative view. So, but I do, you know, I think the vaccine was a brilliant example of, you know, how as human beings we find ways to sort things out and change them. I think we can do that.
Questions, other questions. I see one question about AI. How to kind of ethically, Sam, I think you already replied it in the chat.
Oh, I just said, yes, I agree. So maybe I'll expand on it a little bit to point out what's going on there. So the challenge with artificial intelligence is that it's extremely nebulous. So even that little term, some people talk about AI and mean one thing, and other people will be talking about something different. And so from one perspective, artificial intelligence could just be the automation of a process, which in most cases is a really great solution. It guarantees it's going to happen the same way every single time. It's going to do it quicker. It's going to do it more cheaply, and that's going to benefit everybody who's involved in the process. And so that, you know, AI in that perspective actually is, as general rule, is going to be a positive thing. It's going to reduce risk. And then there's other kinds of AI. We talk about deep learning and machine learning, where we've got tools which are looking at huge data sets where they can see the inputs and they can see the valid outputs. And then the machine is essentially going to guess what to do with a new input to see if it's a valid output. And it will be trained through that process. But precisely what's happening between the input and the output is very difficult to tell. And there's quite a lot of risk in terms of what can go wrong, because we just don't know. You haven't tested it with every possible input, because otherwise you reduce the automation process. And a great example of this is autonomous vehicles. So they're driving around, they've been tested, within all the tests, and they seem to be able to work well. And then they go onto the road and we know they've killed people. You think, well, that wasn't, clearly within the boundaries of the test, then it seemed like it would be okay. And then it's gone and done something we clearly don't want it to. So how are you able to deal with that properly? And how are you able to bring that into businesses and use it in an ethical way? That question hasn't been fully answered without just saying, it's probably safer not to use it, which doesn't seem like a sensible solution either. So what we need to do is be engaging with artificial intelligence and other kinds of technology. I mean, all kinds of technology suffer from this, but engaging with technology in a way that is informed. So we've got people in there who actually know what's going on with it, and that we're thinking about ethics alongside everything else. It's very easy to just justify it. The way that technology tends to work, this is very interesting. Well, I think it's interesting because this is what I'm interested in. But within the last week, I was listening to a lecturer talk about Java and how to code using Java. And one of the things that she said was, absolutely everything in reality can exist as data in their code. I think, well, I see kind of where you're going. She demonstrated how just in lines of code, she was able to code the attributes of a triangle. And she demonstrated all the code. It got the measurements of the lengths and the angles, demonstrated in some code. I think, yeah, but it's not triangle, is it? A triangle is a shape. I can see a triangle. I'm just reading some words there. It's not the same thing. And from a technologist's perspective, the data exists, the attributes are all captured in it, and therefore it ticks all of the boxes. And I think that, as coaches, professionals, we should be putting a line in the sand and saying there are some things where just sticking a piece of technology in that ticks all of the functional boxes, that's not the same thing. Meeting via Zoom, even though you do all of the same things, it's not the same as being in person. I don't like it. I'd much rather be in the same room with you and be able to shake your hands. And that's not how Zoom works. And even when you get a tool that gives you some kind of haptic feedback when I reach out with my hand, it's still not the same thing, even though it's ticked that box. And the same is going to be happening in the way that decisions are made in organizations. So we should be aware of that, and we should be supporting our coachees to be able to think that through as well.
Can I just pitch in here, Reza, if you don't mind? Yeah, Sam, I think it's really important as well. So if you think of how AI is used in recruitment, it's for decision making. So we have to look at AI, and we've done this for 8 years in our company, as a tool that's nothing to do with decision making. It's a piece of data and insight that is more objective, but it's not used at all to make decisions. So it's some insight. It's like a third eye. We use natural language processing that comes from the transcriptions of the coaching calls. And it's all human-based, but that data is like a third eye, but never to make decisions. It's a piece of information that the coach and the user looks at to give insight, whether it's about someone's confidence, about their ambition, about their EQ, but not to make decisions. I think that's really fundamental, is what's the AI used for.
Yeah.
Actually, even
sorry.
Please, Shannon. I just wanted to add, even the use of the word AI is kind of misleading. We are not there yet. It's machine learning. What you put in, what you get out, and it's like like all mathematicians, they all became data scientists. So at the end of the day, these are the tools that we used to have, but not enough clean data. Now there are more clean data, and it's another kind of decision-making tool. But I agree. Yeah. Anyway, so not my expertise, but still, kind of, I have an opinion. You see, Sheldon?
Well, not my expertise, but I do have an opinion as well. I think we also have to remind ourselves that technology is sort of built off of, there are certain assumptions in technology that may not be universal. So the best example I have is, they say that, if women were scientists, then birthing and maternity technology would have been far more advanced, right? Because those of us who were creating the science of that were not experiencing the actual thing. So the development, that technologist you talked about, Sam, it sounded like she is carrying in her certain sort of assumptions of the world, views of the world that are just, that we all need to help test and make sure that it serves the purpose for the intended. So technology, in a sense, is not impervious to social construct and cultural construct. And that, to me, is what the question is sort of pushing at, making sure that we've tested it for those sort of limits and assumptions that it would have embedded in it that may not be universal.
Yes.
And that's why, Sheldon, that the people creating the technology have to be diverse, have to not be of this all the same mold, because otherwise you get the same technology that doesn't fit. That's the seatbelt for women, isn't it? Women are 47% more likely to seriously be hurt in a crash because the seatbelts were never created in a woman's body. So spot on.
Yeah, and just to take that a step further, that there is no solution to it. So I heard a quote, and I'm not sure if it's like a famous quote that I should be attributing. I don't know who said it originally. If you have a brain, you have bias. And the way that machine learning works, it uses neural networks to replicate a brain. There is bias in machine learning, and you can't stop it. So Sheldon, absolutely right, and it's no secret, right? You know, the majority of computer programmers who trained these machine learning algorithms are young white men who live on the west coast of America. That's just who it tends to be. And so there's a particular worldview that's baked into that, which they can't help. Having a diverse workforce, you know, that's inputting into that and training the code helps, but still doesn't solve the problem. It's just going to end up with a different bias. And that's no different from humans. Humans are biased, but we need to just acknowledge, okay, if we're going to roll out an AI algorithm that's going to be affecting hundreds of thousands of people instead of just a one-to-one conversation, what bias do we want? That's a challenge, but it's a real challenge, and there needs to be a solution. And if we don't do it consciously, it's going to be done unconsciously, and that'll be worse. And
Sam, if that conversation happens, we're on a step up from where we were before, if that question gets asked, because that question has never been asked really generally.
Correct. Yeah.
I love technology. I'd slightly challenge what you said, Sam, about coaches are really slow to adapt and don't like tech. I think that's a rather pessimistic view of our profession. I use Otter AI all the time, which is absolutely brilliant, which is a voice translation. I used it to do my master's. It learned phenomenology as a word, which I thought was really impressive. I use Remarkable, which is a digital notebook, so I can access my coaching notes wherever I am on my mobile. I've got the app, it's brilliant. But I agree. I think that the technology is lagging. If I look at the jobs that LinkedIn recommend to me, I just can't make any sense of that whatsoever. I have no idea why they think I'd want to work in a submarine. But anyway, and that's literally true. And I think I attended a really great conference recently, and there was a lady called Mai Ton who's written a book about her experience in HR in Silicon Valley. So I'll put it in the chat, but I'd encourage everyone to read that. It's really enlightening as to what goes on behind the scenes in tech. But I think part of the challenge is just so much out there is getting our heads around it. And one of the things I've just done is recruited somebody to lead on the digital agenda in the UK for EMCC to really help our membership get their heads around what's out there, what tech's available. And then also, I think really importantly, things like security and how we handle our data, because we handle really sensitive data. So yeah, lots of really interesting areas that we could talk about for hours, I'm sure.
Yeah, technology has appeal, isn't it? So we kind of have our opinion, feelings, and everything. But at the end of the day, as somebody said, we always like human is a thinking being, but we are rather a feeling-based organism, isn't it? We tend to think from time to time, but our feelings never stops. And maybe the strength and the beauty of having this space where we can create clarity for our coaches, that's the reflective place, which doesn't really exist in I would say, anywhere else in our daily life, because we are kind of framed, isn't it? I'm a parent, I'm a teacher, I'm a banker, I'm blah blah, and that comes with certain format where I can really reflect on who I am, and who I am is basically how predictable I could be under certain events, isn't it? So knowing myself is about how I would react or I will feel under certain contexts, and that's not easy. Maybe, of course, technology would help with metaverse and everything. I can put myself under different contexts easily, but still, I need a reflective place to understand who am I, how I evolve, how I change. And that's really kind of the whole topic of inclusion. I don't know whether Limbert is here, but yeah, diversity, people tend to talk a lot. It's a boxing exercise. It's a kind of action plan. Whereas inclusion is a feeling. It's a kind of totally coaching issue, how you feel included or not. So it's kind of internal dynamics, isn't it? So this is a place for our coaches. Exactly. And just, reflection is spiritual practice. Correct. And, as I said, we do some work in Brussels, and we tend to start to meet with some other professional bodies. And I was introduced to a faith-based group, and they are kind of doing some work. And they kind of call their members spiritual coaches. These are priests, okay? So they rebranded themselves as spiritual coach. And I said, wow, coaching is really on the radar now. So people are kind of looking into our, not only technology, but other parts of the society. These are different professions are really looking into coaching, how to benefit, what to learn. All right, so anything else, any other burning question, anything you would like to add? From the audience first. You can put it in the chat. So I see some sustainability related debate going on in the background. Perfect. Inclusion, sustainability, climate, AI, technology, all those kind of burning issues that we tend to try to understand. But in reality, I would say, coming back to the early comments of our panelists, we are still in this very human-centric world where there are still, as a person, our coaches, our mentees, but also us as a practitioner can do, can reflect and can learn. So, seeing no question, I would say, in the chat, I will invite our panelists for their final comments, words to kind of close the session. We are not under time pressure, but still, every single moment counts. So then I see a question. What's that? Okay, and the question is about, if I may rephrase it, like democratization, because at the end of the access, but still it's a privileged service for privileged people, can be perceived, because 8 billion people in the world, not all of them maybe got into really, but still, compared to the numbers, like some apps having 1 billion subscribers and everything, we are talking about, yeah, we are 14,000 people. It's kind of drop in the ocean, of course. So I will invite our panelists for their closing remarks, including this last question about the reach, access, democratization, if they would like to add anything. The floor is yours.
I'm happy to start with the democratization, because it's been from the very beginning of starting Untapped AI, the biggest challenge that we continue to have is how to scale what we do. And it is such a big issue for us all that we continually need to be focused on. And we have moved the dial, but not enough. I don't feel happy enough at all of the access that we, whilst it's remote, it's global, we are still only within companies getting to certain levels because of the price point of what we charge. So even in the last year, we have been thinking, how can we, rather than just be coaches, helping particularly leaders to be more like coaches, so that it's not just, you get the service, but it's kind of the teach somebody to fish. But instead of us doing the fishing, how can we teach more to fish? And that is where we're really focused, and obviously with technology, but it's us having to let go, us having to put in standards with that balance of accessibility. It is such a challenge scaling coaching. I haven't got all the answers, but it's a continual thing that we are working on. But I am certainly never keeping still at the point where we have to stop at a level in an organization of where we can reach, because our reach is not good enough. So yeah, it's such a big question.
Thank you, Kendall.
I will give a go now. Yeah, Riza. I think so on the democratization question, I think that's really part of the huge value of technology, right? That we can probably reach people who may not have been able to access what, quite frankly, is a sort of niche and very expensive service. So that's one role I think technology could think more about, like how do you democratize it, and to what extent can you serve an underserved population that really would be in need of it? So maybe, the middle managers and lower. And I think that's a challenge for technology to be able to do that. In terms of final reflections, I think all of what we've been talking about here, when we enter a session, whether it be coaching, supervision, or mentoring, it is a human to human conversation. And I think that we should never, ever forget that human being walks in there with all of who they are, all the challenges that they face, and all the fears and assumptions they face about themselves. And so as coaches, we almost sometimes have to be able to share that with them as well, because we're meeting in a conversation of equals, and sometimes they need to see vulnerability from us as well. So I think remembering always that all that we're talking about here is context, that when our clients come into a session, they bring all of that with them, and we owe it to them to at least be aware and conscious and have views, not necessarily influence their views, but be aware of it and be able to converse in a way that's knowledgeable. So that's part of us learning ourselves all the time. And thirdly, I think dialogue like this amongst ourselves is just absolutely key, because we learn so much from each other. That's the best CPD, talking to somebody else who I may not agree with to begin with, or talking about somebody with a subject that I have absolutely no understanding of how to even begin the conversation on that topic. I think that is our sort of best way of learning and developing and innovating as coaches.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Sheldon.
I would just echo that. My sense is that the medium in which we deliver our work or do our work is purely the tool, is the technique, but as Sheldon said, it's the relationship and the human connection between, I'd say, individuals, but I'd also say individuals and the teams themselves as well, because I think we also need to move away from this very individualistic view of the world. And that's why I got into team coaching. We need to start to look at that more systemic, connected world that we live in a way it's sort of accentuated massively by the pandemic, and technology allows us to do that as a tool. When we talk about democratizing coaching and mentoring to a certain extent, I mean, certainly coaching was something I'd never heard of when I grew up at all. It was something completely new to me. And I think there are still large swathes of our society who don't know what coaching is and don't know what coaching can do. And one of the conversations I had as a result of a book club we ran on diversity and coaching last week was around actually the reason that there are so many underrepresented people in our professional body is because people don't even know it exists. They don't even know that the profession exists. They don't know the opportunities that are out there. And so really, I think as leaders as professional bodies and organizations, we need to be doing more in terms of outreach to those underrepresented parts of our community. We need to be encouraging them to join us And we need to be really proactive in that space. So that's something I'm going to be focusing on next year. So watch this space.
Wow.
Can I add a challenge to you, Rachel, too? Is just in the coaching, mentoring, we've said it a lot, supervision, the word sponsorship needs to be brought in, sponsors, because what we're finding a lot in our work with leaders is that mentoring, particularly for underrepresented groups, whilst it might have some benefits, it doesn't actually affect promotion rates. And sponsors, people, and the difference really being sort of mentoring is more the advice and giving a space, but actually sponsoring somebody who's, you know, not like you and you have more power is about giving up power. And so we're finding a lot that the world of sponsoring, helping sponsors in particular, is a real way to change the system. So I just think
I don't think they're separate things. For me, if you're a mentor, you're also a sponsor, but I guess that's a semantic conversation. But I see sponsorship as a key part of mentoring.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be separate, but it's about giving advice versus giving up power. And so our role as coaches to really enable people with power, whatever you want to call them, is fundamental in how we provide a space, provide support and reflection to do that, because that's the only way to change the system.
Perfect. And Sam?
Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts running through my head. And so I think I'm going to just talk a little bit about what CoachHub does, and then I'll see where my mind goes. And so I think as far as democratization is concerned, the way that we are trying to solve that is through having a global pool and making the most of, you know, being able to tap into a much more flexible pool of coaches than historically has been possible just because of the technology. So a very practical sense, you know, I live in London. So the coaches that I've experienced myself tend to have lived in London, and London is an expensive city and the UK is an expensive country. And so they need to charge more just because of the nature of it. Whereas South Africa is a really similar time zone to us, speak English, relatively similar culture. And I'm able to get a coach there for, you know, a small fraction of the price. Well, if we're able to offer that as a way to combat it, it's going to lead to less work, you'd argue, in the first instance for coaches based in the UK and based in London, because you're more expensive. But if we're talking about the ability to roll it out at scale across tens of thousands of people all at once, you know, that's part of the solution, is being able to use technology to connect the world a little bit more easily. And this is where technology comes in. I completely agree with, I think it's Kendall, that you were talking about the ability to turn organizations into spaces where people can get coaching and not have to need to go to a paid professional coach to do that. But if you can get that from a line manager and from an organization, you know, within the organization itself, that's a much more sustainable way to provide coaching to people. I completely agree with that. And I think all of us will probably know that, you know, my journey of becoming a coach was, I started off being taught the GROW model and some stuff around it, and then went away feeling like I was a coach, and then discovered that I was really, really bad. But I didn't know that at the time. I thought I was doing a great job. And I think, you know, the real thing about being a coach is about mindset change. It isn't just about learning a model. And the way that we often try to introduce coaching into organizations is we teach a model, and then we try to get line managers and leaders in the organization who are somehow kind of pioneering this coaching culture to basically act as robotic as possible within a context of a coaching conversation. Well, you know what's great at being robotic is a robot. You can actually train a robot to deliver the GROW model much better than a human can, like way better. And so if we know we're talking about really trying to get coaching to people, I think we can get coaching models to people using technology at a really low cost. And we, you know, that's the solution is in technology and in little, you know, automated processes that will take people through a self-reflection, which allows them to think about actually kind of where they want to be, and even taps into some more complex things like systems. But I'm not sure that it's getting to the, you know, I'm not sure it's democratizing coaching, you know, the full thing. And so I think actually being able to communicate, you know, where are the ripple makers in organizations that are going to change the culture? So it's more than just saying we've given people a half-day workshop or we've updated some policy documents. We said, okay, this little group of leaders, if we can really change their mindset, then that's where people are going to get it. So yeah, I'll say that, and then I'll also just loop back to where I started from. I think there's a lot of technology change coming. There's a lot of technology change that's happened, and it's going to keep on changing, and a lot of it is going to fundamentally change the way that we interact with technology. Everybody carries a smartphone around nowadays, and 20 years ago didn't really. In 5 years' time, I don't think you'll be carrying a smartphone around. Technology is going to be changing a huge amount. And I think we as coaches have got a responsibility. I think Sheldon, who was talking about this right at the beginning, if we are able to understand where organizations are going, then we can go into those conversations equipped to be able to deal with what issues our coachees bring to us. And so just putting in that effort to research, what does Web 3.0 mean? What is the metaverse actually? If we can understand that, then we're able to support our coachees in where they're wanting to go as well.
Being aware of time, I'd like to thank all of the panelists. So more we speak, more interesting topics are opening up. That's the idea, isn't it? The dialogue. So it's like having my best friends at my living room, having this conversation around coaching, mentoring. That's lovely. A few talks, though, if I may add, when we talk about democratization of coaching, we need to also think more about democratization of coach training. So not only having access to coaching, but also people should have access for coach training. And then maybe where we are missing is, what do we do for mentee and coachee development? So we tend to kind of put all our resources on the coach development. But what about the coaches? We know if the coaches are better prepared, the result is even better. So are there things that we can do for coachee and mentee development? Question mark. Democratization of coaching through platforms. Yeah, some also people say like Uberization, which is great. Every sector will get Uberized. That's perfect. But as Sam said, new technologies are arising. Even what we see today will be very different very quickly, most probably. Yeah, sustainability. The question how coaches should really tackle those, not only sustainable, but on any thorny issue that Sheldon mentioned. We're working on a kind of reflective approach. Rather than having kind of directive way for coaches to tackle this issue, how we can create a kind of reflective approach for coaches to tackle those difficult questions, including sustainability. What do they want to sustain? So, but whatever. So we're working on at EMCC. We also have this work group. We put together all these big coaching providers, platforms together to talk about technology and AI, how they change our profession. So they are working together with our volunteers now to come up with maybe some standards. This is their work. We are just a platform to provide this. And the concept of dialogue, non-judgmental dialogue, how to agree to disagree, and how we can create those platforms, not only as individual, but also as training providers. But at the end of the day, we shouldn't forget, many people around the screen today are also the business leaders. They run their own business as a training company or whatever, as a coach. And all the debate we have today is relevant for all of us. Not only we're talking about something distant, but ourselves, our own vulnerability, anti-fragility, our own resilience, our own humanity. And as it's been said many times, these kind of conversations are maybe the best place to get to know ourselves better, to tackle with the issues better, and also our continuous professional development, isn't it? A place to reflect. So thank you all for your choice to be here today. Our panelists, our organizers, Denise, you did a great job. This is a great feeling. I'm back on screen speaking again on Thursday from Barcelona. I'll be attending a conference of the business school, IAC there, and we'll have a kind of spot to broadcast from there. But until that time, the program is so loaded, so busy, so inspiring. So thank you, all organizers. On behalf of EMCC, I would really extend my gratitude to all of you to make it happen. But I think there's a place now to reflect, or what's the game plan? Denise or Dila, could somebody help me? What's coming next now?
I can jump in on that one actually, Reza.
Okay, Nicola, yeah.
We're moving into networking now, and those of you who are familiar with the GPS Dialogue series will be familiar with our Zoom networking. So how this works in practice is that we will be mixing you up in small Zoom rooms so that you can say hi to somebody you may not already know. And Dilla and Julian behind the scene are working their magic to put you all into breakout rooms. So what I would say is that if you'd like to stay for the networking, brilliant, be lovely to see you. If you're not staying for the network, then if you sign off now, otherwise we'll put you in a breakout room. You'll be like, oh, you'll have been broken out when you didn't need to, or didn't want to. So anyway, moving into networking for Zoom now. But before we open up those rooms, I also wanted to remind you, I'll put in the chat here as well, the website for the GPS as well, EMCC Global GPS.org. And then you will see the remainder of the schedule for the next 3 or 4 days as well. So I'll just pop that in the chat there too. But I'm assuming everybody who's staying here now would like to stay for the networking. And it's really brilliant to see our panel members here staying for networking as well. And Julian and Dilla will be able to break you out as well. It's a little bit more movement at the moment, so I'll just leave it for a couple of seconds, Dilla and Julian.
Nicola, can we just ask people to put comments into the chat? Quick reflections.
Oh, yeah. I beg your pardon, Denise. Yes, please do put your, while you're still here, please put your reflections into the chat. Thank you for the reminder, Denise.
For me, what came out of the session today was, coming out of the pandemic, we certainly need more human-centric leadership style, where things like empathy, compassion, and engagement will be big, while paradoxically at the same time having leaders grapple with some of these big technology challenges. So it's sort of the paradox of leadership, while also being responsive to some of the big social and environmental issues. So leaders are facing quite a challenging churn. And some skills that they previously were strong on, they may now need to develop new skills. And as coaches, mentors, and supervisors, we have to sort of help them get there with that discomfort that they will come to us with, and make sure that we have skills that can help develop that conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
What has been great from this time just now is seeing the appetite of not only the other panelists, but of all the people that I've met to grow, for us to grow as coaches and to want to serve our coachees as well as possible, dealing with such changes in the way that the world is operating, the way our organizations are operating, the way that leaders are having to think and deal with the information they're being presented with and deal with people. I think just the desire that we have as coaches to serve them well and to serve people at a systemic level to make a positive change is really encouraging, and it's a real privilege to have been part of it. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you all. Brilliant session, which really paves the way for our next sessions. We've got the session following this afternoon, led by Mary, with the Myla Campbell team, and we've got the panel this evening with Julie Haddock-Miller. So thank you once again, and yeah, please do, you've been brilliant in putting your comments into the chat, but do add any immediate thoughts, ideas, so that we can really build up that storyboard of thoughts, feelings, reflections as we move throughout the 4 days. Thank you.